We can only face the world if we know ourselves. Charot. Makasaysayang araw po. Historic day to everyone. I'm Xiao Chua. I'm the historian for the Filipino story. And welcome to another strange episode of Ask Xiao! Muli, marami pong salamat sa ating mga kababayan for sending your questions. Hopefully, I will try to answer them humbly at, well, kayo na pong bahala. Pagpasensyahan nyo na lang effort. Okay? Sige po. It's Xiao time! Okay. Enrique Londres, 6134, asked, why do Filipinos love celebrating a person's fame or success, even if they're only 1% Filipino? 1% Filipino! Can we really quantify being a Filipino? Pero sige, first, why is there a hunger or thirst for recognition? Because for the longest time, even if we're a great people, because of our colonial experience, 300 years, the colonizers made us feel that we're not good enough just because they're white and we were brown. They were the colonizers and we were the colonials. That is why Juan Luna is very important in our history. Because during that time, Juan Luna showed them that we are artistic. And he won the gold medal in the Exposición de Bellas Artes de Madrid. And not only that, he also won a medal in the Paris Exposition of 1889. Which is very much like the Olympics of art. But for, people with little Filipino ancestry, maybe because we still have that lack of recognition in the world. That's why when someone is being recognized internationally, we want to claim them as still part of us. For some people, that seems strange. Some people do not really like it because these people are technically not Filipino. In the technical sense, they're not citizens of the Philippines. They have little identification culturally with Filipinos. But on the other hand, it also tells us of how embracing our concept of Filipino is, that if you have at least a Filipino heritage, as little as it is, you still belong. Kasama ka pa din sa pagka-Filipino. Well, I hope I handled that right. Next question. Captain Abuse. Sorry. Countries in South America were colonized by Spain and can speak Spanish to this day. While here, there are rarely any Filipino who can speak fluent Spanish despite being the longest colonized country by Spain. Why is that? This is a very complicated question to answer, but I will try to answer it. The colonization of Latin America was different from the colonization of the Philippines. What happened in Latin America was this. When the Spaniards came there, they had brought their diseases, their viruses, where the people had no immunity. And so they were obliterated. There were small pockets, for example, of Mexican Indians, of the Incas, but most of the people died, which means that the population that turned out to be Latin Americans or Latinos, eventually, most of them were actually white people who were already speaking Spanish in the first sense. They were called Creoles, the Spaniard born in Latin America. And so, understandably, until today, they can still speak Spanish. And in fact, Spanish is the dominant language because that has been always the language that they were speaking. In the Philippines, fortunately enough, the Spaniards did not obliterate Filipinos. They came here as friars and they came here as civil officials and they did not teach us their language. It was the Spaniards who adjusted and learned the languages of the Philippines. And so, most Filipinos did not learn Spanish except the elites. And so, it's actually wrong to say that we spoke Spanish in general. We did, except the rich families. And of course, the death knell to the Spanish language, despite still being spoken by the elites of the Philippines, was the introduction of English and public school education, which made English widespread in the Philippines. And that's why we became not Spanish speakers, but most of us at least could speak basic English. And many Filipinos are really very good English speakers. Just like me. Ding! Next question. Werner or Werner, I'm like speaking German. Werner or Werner Salazar 7595 asked, what is your take on claims that the first person who navigated the world is a Filipino guy named Enrique of Malacca? Okay, this piece of history came from the Pigafetta account, that there's this slave that Magellan acquired in Malacca, present-day Malaysia, and they christened him Enrique de Malacca. There's a theory that this guy did not come from Malacca. He was just acquired there, but he actually came from the Philippines. This theory was made mainstream by Carlos Quirino because of his writings. He was saying that definitely he is a Filipino because he was able to understand the languages of the people here. And so that is why if you're going to take that claim, it was not Sebastian del Cano who circumnavigated the world for the first time, but it was actually Enrique. Because when Enrique was supposedly born in the Philippines, he was taken as a slave in Malacca, bought by Magellan, and went to him in the circumnavigation of the world. When he went to the Philippines, he has returned. And therefore, he was the first person to circumnavigate the world. But if you're going to take a look at the Pigafetta account, he was not able to understand the first Filipinos who offered them food. So that means he did not know Philippine language. So how was he able to talk to the Datus? Because he knows Malay. Because he came from Malaya, he came from Malacca, which speaks Malay, which has a few similar words with Filipino languages. So we are not sure if he was able to circumnavigate the world because we were not sure if he was able to return to his actual home, Malacca. But even so, your premise that Enrique went back to the bayan still stands for me because there was no political Philippines at the time. There's no political Malaysia. The whole Southeast Asia is the Austronesian world. And so when Enrique de Malacca went to the Philippines during the Magellan Exposition of 1521, even if he was not in Malacca, he was home because the home of the Austronesian is the whole of Southeast Asia. And definitely at that time, Enrique was an Austronesian. Aero Anger. Okay, engineer. Aero Engineer 9490. I've always wondered, what would be the Philippines today if the Japanese did not occupy our country during World War II? From the history books that I've read, life was comparable to mainland US during pre-war Philippines. Sandali lang. Life was comparable to the mainland US during the pre-war Philippines. Oh, probably they said that because economy-wise, we were a colony of the United States and therefore the peso exchange rate was following the US exchange rate. But I will not say that we were comparable. There were a lot of agrarian problems during the time of the Americans here, even up to the time of the Commonwealth period. That means that there were still many poor people in the Philippines at that time. It's just that the population was really very small as compared to today. That's why there is a semblance of the good life in a way. And that's why there's like a nostalgia, a notion of peacetime. But it was not because there were many revolts that happened during that time, including the Sakdal Revolt, including the rise of the Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas and the Partido Socialista ng Pilipinas because there were problems in the Philippines. There were economic problems and that was that. That said, if the Japanese did not come to the Philippines, many of our old churches, many of the old buildings in Manila would have stood. If the war did not destroy them, they would still be here and maybe perhaps our sense of heritage, culture, sense of the past would have remained. When World War II happened, it destroyed our archives. It destroyed our documents, our artworks. It destroyed much of our record of history. It destroyed our architectural marvels, buildings of the great architects. And so because of that, we lost our sense of place. We lost our sense of importance of these buildings. And now, we're in a metropolis that is unplanned, too urban, and we wanted to rebuild quickly. That's why we just build it, and that's it. And I guess if World War II did not happen, a lot of our great Filipinos would still be able to become part of the government, like Jose Santos, and they would still be able to serve our country further, and perhaps our country would be a better place. But of course, we really do not know that because the war happened. And it's really hard to talk about hindsight when we talk about history. Something to think about. John Oswald Palines. Or is that John Oswald Palines? Who do you think will be the next Xiao Chua once you retire? Because it's only you who I see whenever I see shows about Philippine history. The true question should be, will I retire? I don't want to retire. Patuloy ako maglilingkod sa inyo hanggang sa aking huling hininga. But hindi ibig sabihin nun, ako lang ang papanoorin nyo. Okay? There are many historians today. Some of them are historians who are in the archives. They find out about the past through research, and they're academic historians. And it's good to know that there are a lot of historians, young and old, already realize the importance of what we call public history or kasaysayang pampubliko, where we bring history closer to the people. Kasi sa tao naman talaga ang kasaysayan. You just have to watch enough to see all the other historians in the Philippines who are doing the same work as I am. You know, my work is just a representative of the bigger work that we are all doing to make history more relevant so that we will learn our lessons, we will know about ourselves, we will build our identity as a culture, as Filipinos, and that would bring us to better judgments to decide for the kaginhawaan of our country. Kevin Geronimo, 3563. Sir Xiao, what made you decide to study history? How did you fall in love with it? Some people think that history is boring kasi it's the memorization of dates, of places, of hard-to-spell names. When you look at history as facts, you will really get bored. It's good that I have a grandmother who are telling me stories of history because history in the Filipino context is kasaysayan. According to Xiao Salazar, and kasaysayan came from the word saysay. Saysay is meaningful stories. Stories that can touch hearts, stories that can teach a lesson, stories where we are able to learn that our country is great, that our ancestors are heroes, and that inspires people. The real clincher was when I read Ambeto Campo. I read Rizal Without the Overcoat. And around that time when I read him, I was fascinated because he talked about the past as if it was a personal journey. And then I realized how cool it is to teach history or to be a historian. That would further be cemented in 1997 when I was in first year high school when I watched Batas Militar. September 21, 1997 at 9 o'clock in the evening at ABS-CBN, I watched it and I realized, why did I not know about this? Why had people already forgotten in 1997 what happened in 1972? And so that's when I vowed, I want to be a teacher. I want to reach more people. I want to reach the children so that I can talk to them about parts of our history where we showed our greatness, showed our valor, and hopefully that will inspire them to become better Filipinos, to take care of their country. Because in knowing, you're able to love. Mamahalin mo lang ang bayan mo kung kilala mo siya. I remember when I was in grade 5 and my mother and my tita were touring me in places like Fort Santiago. I already envisioned myself that I was the one telling the stories and I have children with me going around. I was just so grateful to be given that kind of opportunity and trust by our countrymen that they're able to allow me to tell the story of our people in our living rooms, on television, in the internet, and through the Filipino story. So, ayan, nako, that's all the questions that we have. Napakarami po mga kaibigan, napakahaba. I hope you're able to learn something about ourselves and our country because we can only face the world if we know ourselves. Charot. Please like, share, subscribe, and ask more questions so we can make more videos. Again, that was Xiao. Bye-bye.